I was 24 years old at the time. If you don't have enough self-esteem to stand against the pressure from your colleagues and chain of command because you don't want something in your body, it's extremely difficult. But I'm young. I come from a military family. I have great respect for my grandfather, who served in the Canadian artillery for 35 years. That's beyond the usual 25 years of service we often hear about. He dedicated his life to this country. I wanted to do something similar. So losing my military career so abruptly was devastating. It's funny, but this isn't a career you can just pick up somewhere else. Whether you're a cook, a driver, or an infantry soldier, the military is a family you never want to leave once you've experienced it. Being thrown out so quickly was hard. The transition back to civilian life is tough.
Durant tout cet enfer-là, quand que je faisais durant des semaines et des semaines le piquet comme ça à l'extérieur, en plein hiver, j'ai demandé l'aide du padré de la base de Valcartier parce qu'à un moment donné, en plein milieu de la nuit, j'ai eu le goût de m'enlever la vie, littéralement, dans mon appartement de Val-Belair.
While in the United States, Donald Trump signed an executive order reinstating military personnel discharge for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine, the situation in Canada is quite different. Here, military members who were forced to leave the Canadian Armed Force for the same reason are still fighting with a class action lawsuit against the government. Their lawyer, Catherine Christensen from Valour Legal Center in Edmonton, is leading the legal battle. I spoke with her to get an update on the progress of this case.
So we are appealing that decision, mainly because the grievance system within the Canadian military does not cover charter issues. And there were several charter breaches in our claim. And there was another case in Vancouver that said the same said what I'm saying. So they've granted us an appeal to challenge the initial ruling. There are two lawsuits that are the same, just filed on two different dates with two different groups. So the initial group was 330 people. The appeal is going forward with 280 people. The second group is 128 members of the forces. They're pretty much the same lawsuit, just in a separate action. Time has been helping us out. I think if I had tried to bring this case in 2022 or 2023, I don't think we'd have even survived this long. But we do have over 650,000 pages of evidence of wrongdoing by the chain of command over the whole COVID mandate issue. There was a real abuse of power there and a violation of charter rights, and that's the case that we're bringing. We're saying that chain of command, the chief of defense staff, said that he doesn't have to follow the law in Canada, and we're saying yes, he does.
Among the members of the lawsuit is Frédéric Villeneuve-Normand, a former supply technician with the Canadian Armed Force. He recalls facing pressure and threat of dismissal under Section 5F of the Queen's Regulation and Orders for the Canadian Forces, which deem the member unfit for further service. After enduring repeated humiliation on base due to his refusal to get vaccinated, Frédéric ultimately made the difficult decision to resign against his will. Today, he shares his story with us.
My name is Frédéric Villeneuve-Normand. I served in the Canadian Army for 4 years, and during those 4 years, I served through the COVID-19 pandemic. During that time, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory for members of the armed forces, as well as many federal employees, such as border officers, the RCMP, and even Canada Post employees who were also required to take the vaccine. But in the military, it was handled differently because it's a military environment. Orders and rules are stricter. Those who were more hesitant about taking the vaccine, like myself, who was 24 years old at the time, were first asked and then ordered to receive the vaccination. Initially, it wasn't an order, but once the majority of the armed forces members were vaccinated, it quickly became mandatory. By October 2021, it was officially required within the military. Even at that point, I was still refusing to take it. They told me I was one of the last ones who hadn't gotten it. Already we were being lied to, because a few months later I found out that there were far more of us who had refused than just a small handful. They kept us isolated in a little bubble, making us believe we were the only ones left so they could mentally manipulate us into taking the vaccine. I held my ground because in Europe, there were already studies coming out about the Moderna vaccine. That was the only brand available to us in the military. We were required to take Moderna and no other vaccine. In the Nordic countries, mainstream media reports showed that for young people under 30, the risks of taking the Moderna vaccine outweighed the benefits. So I was paying attention to what was happening elsewhere to make an informed decision and reject the vaccine. Giving up a military career like that is no small thing. But I chose to listen to myself and prioritize my health, so I refused the vaccine. As a result, my chain of command in the military treated me like a black sheep, as if I were disobeying an order. The vaccine mandate was always a directive, but different chains of command interpreted it differently. Mine treated it as if it were a direct order that I was refusing. I was placed under warning and surveillance. This meant that I was ordered not to enter any Canadian Armed Forces buildings. However, since I was still being paid, I had to report every morning to the Valcartier base, stand outside the supply depot, Building 188, and wait at the picket line, literally standing at parade rest, until a sergeant came to give me my daily instructions. I was always assigned outdoor tasks, which were often demeaning. My chain of command didn't call them demeaning. They said they were necessary tasks. But when you're asked to clear snow off old national defense vehicles that obviously won't be used all winter or to remove dead shrubs, it's clear what's really going on. I only had a 4-year military career, but by doing this interview, I represent a lot of people who are part of a class action lawsuit. We lost about 9% of the Canadian military due to the vaccine mandate. And that 9% includes people with 10, 15, or 20 years of service. People who were dismissed and swept under the rug because they made a personal choice about their own bodies. I find that unacceptable. I have great respect for the people in this lawsuit. Some of them served in Afghanistan. These are real men of honor, real military men of value, and we lost them because of Trudeau's power trip, just to boost vaccination rates. At the start of Canada's vaccine rollout, federal employees were used to inflate the numbers, in my opinion. Afghanistan was a major driver of military recruitment, but after Afghanistan, retention became a serious problem. Keeping experienced personnel in the ranks became harder and harder. And then things only got worse over time, especially with Trudeau's arrival. And with the introduction of progressive, woke policies into the military, they changed the rules too much. Suddenly you could have a beard or even colored hair, though not in operational theaters or exercises. But even then, just walking around the base and seeing a fellow soldier wearing the uniform properly, but with a giant pink beard just to mock the system, was ridiculous, but allowed. This led to a loss of respect for the uniform and for the institution. The military is where patriotism should reign. There are hundreds of thousands of soldiers who are no longer alive today who once wore that uniform. We must respect that uniform. The biggest problem in the military is retention, far more than recruitment. Young people don't want to join because of all this woke policy nonsense. It's no surprise. And what's really ridiculous is that about 6 months after purging the unvaccinated from the military, who made up 9% of the ranks, there was suddenly a 10% personnel shortfall, according to official reports. They say they're short 10% of the ideal number of active members. But they just kicked out 9% of the military 6 months earlier. It's ridiculous.
Moi, je vais renverser tous ces décisions, ces vaccins obligatoires, et je vais permettre tous les militaires qui ont été expulsés de revenir. On va nommer les juges qui sont vraiment neutres, qui vont mettre en œuvre notre Constitution et nos droits. Au lieu. Maintenant, les juges agissent pour protéger les droits du gouvernement au lieu des droits de la citoyenneté. Ouais. On va s'en sortir.
C'est bon, c'est ça ma question.
Et j'étais là avec James Topp.
Okay.
Vous vous souvenez de lui?
Ben oui.
C'est lui qui a marché à travers tout le pays pour défendre le droit des soldats non vaccinés. Et j'ai marché avec lui
Okay.
À Ottawa. C'était très controversé dans le temps, mais je l'ai fait sans excuse.
OK. Ah, mais j'ai bien hâte de voir ce qui va se passer dans le futur.
Merci beaucoup, cher ami. Et merci de votre service.
Merci beaucoup.
The class action is called Operation Upweiler. We are confident because the tide is turning, with Donald Trump's return and the possible election of Pierre Poilievre in Canada. This is our best chance to appeal. The reason I made my video is that I find it strange that we have the United States as a neighbor, and yet here in Canada, our media don't even talk about what's happening there, such as the American military reinstating unvaccinated soldiers. Trump's policies are exactly the kind of changes I'd like to see happen here. A new mindset could emerge with Poilievre. We don't know what the future holds, but it would definitely be better for our country. We need to get back on track.
Durant tout cet enfer-là, quand que je faisais durant des semaines et des semaines le piquet comme ça à l'extérieur en plein hiver, j'ai demandé l'aide du padré de la base de Valcartier parce qu'à un moment donné, en plein milieu de la nuit, j'ai eu le goût de m'enlever la vie, littéralement, dans mon appartement de Val-Bélair. J'ai retombé sur le courriel tantôt, puis je veux vous le lire. Ce courriel-là, c'est un cri du cœur de ma part en 2021, quand j'avais besoin d'aide. Bonjour, capitaine, je suis soldat Frédéric. Au moment où j'écris ce courriel, il est dans les petites heures du matin. Ça fait 5 jours que je me réveille plusieurs fois dans la nuit sans réussir à dormir paisiblement. J'ai tenté de faire valoir mes points afin de garder mon emploi, mais la vision des Forces armées canadiennes est différente. Donc, suite à ça, j'ai décidé qu'il était mieux pour moi et mon bien-être de quitter les Forces armées canadiennes. Avec l'année de l'enfer que j'ai vécu, avec toutes mes épreuves, j'ai toujours resté humble face à l'organisation et face à mes collègues, étant en mise en garde et surveillance pour avoir refusé une. Je trouve ça abusé, mais je peux comprendre. Ce que je ne comprends pas, c'est qu'on semble vouloir m'humilier ou m'utiliser comme exemple envers les autres. Chaque matin à 7h30, je suis devant le 188 et toute personne rentrant travailler me voit, me juge, me font des regards déplacés et certains des commentaires. J'ai appris par mon ex-conjointe, toujours en Lettonie, qu'elle recevait des photos de moi par message texte prises par ses collègues ici au pays, me ridiculisant. Je crois que je mérite du respect et le fait de me faire demander des tâches extérieures dénigrantes que je considère comme punitives fait en sorte de dégrader mon état physique et mental. Chaque fois que je me présente au travail, je sens que je perds ma force et ma vitalité. J'ai énormément de difficultés à manger, je ne dors plus profondément et j'ai depuis 3 jours une boule de stress très désagréable dans mon ventre à tous les jours. Mes seules sources de bonheur dans ma dernière année étaient ma femme, maintenant on divorce, l'accès au gym de la base afin de me changer les idées et prendre soin de ma forme physique. Le gym a été fermé et refusé à cause que j'étais non vacciné. Aller au travail et avoir du plaisir avec l'équipe, juste rire me faisait du bien. Je n'ai même plus ça. J'ai besoin de temps pour remonter la pente padrée et je ne peux plus y arriver seul. Bonne journée, un humain qui veut du respect.
When I was singled out as a black sheep, forced to stand at the picket line every morning in front of Building 188, my colleagues didn't even dare talk to me. They wouldn't even write to me privately on Facebook Messenger. They looked down at the ground when they passed me. No one dared speak to me, not even outside of work hours. A few months later, after I had returned my uniform, I went to train at XL Signature Gym in Val-Bélair, a civilian gym. The gym owner told me that some military personnel training there had mentioned they were ordered not to speak to me. They were really wondering why. That's when I realized it wasn't necessarily their personal choice not to talk to me. They were being pressured by the chain of command, which had explicitly told them not to.
Do you think these measures were meant to coerce you into changing your mind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They relied entirely on social pressure. I imagine they thought I would break and take the vaccine. It wasn't easy. I was 24 years old at the time. If you don't have enough self-esteem to stand against the pressure from your colleagues and chain of command because you don't want something in your body, it's extremely difficult. But I'm young. I come from a military family. I have great respect for my grandfather, who served in the Canadian artillery for 35 years. That's beyond the usual 25 years of service we often hear about. He dedicated his life to this country. I wanted to do something similar, so losing my military career so abruptly was devastating. It's funny, but this isn't a career you can just pick up somewhere else. Whether you're a cook, a driver, or an infantry soldier, the military is a family you never want to leave once you've experienced it. Being thrown out so quickly was hard. The transition back to civilian life is tough. People don't understand that in my mind, I'm more intense than the average person. When I got civilian jobs afterward, it was always difficult working with regular people, especially in unionized jobs where the mentality is all about me, myself, and I. In the military, we don't think like that. If I finish my tasks and see someone struggling, I help them. No civilian job operates like that. And I think that military mindset is disappearing. It's a shame. I almost took my own life. Thankfully, I didn't go through with it. In 2021, I experienced public humiliation on base, rejection from my ex-girlfriend due to social pressure, and abandonment by my family. It left deep scars. That's why, this summer, I took my savings and went on an adventure out west. I needed to disconnect from people. It helped me because, honestly, being a young person today is tough. Everyone lives in their own little reality, inside their own head. We're not all on the same page. And that's the problem. We have the United States right next to us, a massive country that is changing. Meanwhile, we're still stuck in our bubble.
While in the US, there is a lot of change, man. Here in Canada, we don't have an election. We have a leadership race. But you, Canadian, want an election now. So go and fill our petition at calltheelection.ca. Make your voice heard and make sure we are putting pressure to have election right now.